Okay, great. All right, I just started recording. All right, so from current slide. Okay. All right, so yesterday we went through a little bit, why this tool matters and how it fits into a kind of a learning journey process. We also went through what you'll need in order to actually implement the goal roster, if you especially were to do it by phone or a tablet. And like I said, now we'll go over the content of the goal roster again today. We'll get through the rest of the questions and I'll repeat the ones that we went through already. And then we can talk about the next steps and everything. So as I mentioned yesterday, the standard goal roster form has 5 sections. We have general information, consent, household information, information about girls, and GPS and other observations. And yesterday we went through sections 1 and does someone need to speak or are you just unmuted? Okay. All right. So we're going to go through the rest of the sections today. Just as a reminder, though, the home screen for the app that you will use to implement the tool looks like this. Whenever you are ready to use a new questionnaire, you're going to select fill blank form. And as you go through each page of the questionnaire, you're just going to swipe right to left as if you were flipping a page in a book. And that's how you get from question to question. If it doesn't allow you to proceed, it's because the question that you are on is required. Section 1 was the general information. As you might remember yesterday, I suggested that you guys assemble whoever's going to implement the tool into teams of 2. They work together in pairs, and each team should receive a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. That's the number you're recording here. So if I and Deborah were in a team number 4, we would put number 4 in the question of please record your roster ID. You're going to enter today's date. Again, because it's a phone or a tablet, it's pretty automated, so that date should already be in there, and you're just going to make sure it's correct and continue by swiping right to left. You're going to enter where you are, and this should not change for the day. So what is your location and what is your sublocation? In your case, I think we discussed that you would modify this question for your context. So you might be saying, what is the ward? And what is the hamlet for what is the sublocation? So we would modify these questions to be customized to you and make sure the answer choices also make sense as well. Then you would consent. So as I mentioned yesterday, you're going to count the number of households you go to as a team. So if you are at the first household, it's household number 1. You enter 4 for your team, 1 for the household number, and so on. Team 3, if you're in team 3 and it was your 14th household, you would enter number 314. You're going to introduce the program. So you already have made your way to the house. You have to, as I mentioned yesterday, really think through how you want to introduce yourselves. Make sure you're not over-promising. Make sure you're thorough. Make sure that they feel comfortable. And you're going to ask to interview the woman who knows the most about the family or the oldest woman. And if not available, a man is okay. So again, let's consider for a moment who the ideal respondent is. It's a woman who knows the most about the people living in that home, preferably an older woman. And again, there's some what ifs here. What if a man wants to respond to the questions? That's totally okay. And again, they might ask for help, or it might become almost a group effort. But if he insists or he doesn't feel comfortable with you speaking to his wife or aunt or grandmother or whatever, there's no need to fight it too hard. You can just say, that's fine, I'll speak to you instead. If no one is home, you move on. If that keeps happening over and over and over and over again, so much so that you're not getting a good bit of information, you guys should check in with each other. Did you choose a good day and time to go to this particular community, or did you choose a time when no one is going to be home? And if the respondent is too young, it's not a good idea. If it's a child headed home and there's no one else to respond to your questions except that child, I recommend you move on to the next house. And as I mentioned yesterday, you can make a judgment as a team about what constitutes too young. Normally, we recommend. Can you all please make sure you're muted unless you have a question? I recommend, we recommend as a team that you don't speak to anyone under the age of 16, but as a team, as an organization, you guys can decide what you want your rule of thumb to be. Again, just consider how you are going to introduce yourself to household members, and please, please, please work as a group to decide how you want the people who are implementing the tool to do that. Make sure that they practice identifying themselves and their partners, identifying the organization they're working for, what they do, where they're located, the organization that is. Do not overpromise what you're delivering on. Just say, listen, we're looking to find out a little bit more about girls who live in the community because we want to design better programs. Don't say we are planning to implement a program here that will serve your girls. That already is a bit of an overpromise. Not because it's not going to happen, but because if for any reason it doesn't, you don't want to deal with the consequence of that. Be prepared to answer questions or concerns. You might get other kinds of questions like, why aren't you asking about the boys? Or I have this problem, can you help me? So just be prepared for that. Again, don't promise or give anything, but if you can collect on a little sheet or card a bit of information about other organizations or other services in the community that you can hand over to them, that might be a way to address their concerns. And again, be friendly, be appropriate to the setting and your culture, but just remember not to be overly so. You can't spend all day at just one house. You have to make your way through the entire community as a team. So you will obtain consent, yes or no. And again, this is required, otherwise you won't be able to move on in the rest of the questionnaire. And what consent means is that they have agreed to answer the questions. If you don't get consent, that's okay. You might want to make sure you understand why, because it's worth noting the reasons why people are not agreeing to consent, and just move on to the next household. And if they're too young, again, they might be ready to answer the questions. They're like, sure, I can do this. But because you have decided as a team that you don't want to interview anyone under a certain age, you yourself are going to select no to the consent question. This is important. It's not because they haven't consented. It's because you are deciding that it is not appropriate. Okay? Then you're going to do household information. So this is the part where we have stopped off. And so now we're on section 2B. You're speaking with someone, so you're going to identify what role the person has in the household. Are they the grandmother, the mother, another woman, a grandfather, a father, or some other man, like an uncle, a brother, so on. And then you're going to ask how many people live here in the household most of the time. Okay, so I'm going to ask everybody to hold their fingers up, even though I can't see you. Hold all 5 fingers up on one hand. Okay, and let's work together on this. And I'm gonna see if I can put my camera on so you can see me. Hold on a second. I want you guys to be able to see me for as long as my camera works, because this part is important. Okay, there we go. All right, so I've got 5 fingers up, okay? And the reason I'm doing this is because this is where the most important part is about to come into play, because you are trying to get a count of how many girls exist in your community. Okay, so I hope you can all see that. So 5 fingers, because in this question, how many people live here most of the time? Don't forget babies, relatives, household help, and visitors. And what I mean by visitors are people who are going to be staying in this home long enough, they might benefit from your program. I don't mean a person who's coming just for the weekend. Sometimes we live with visitors who are not going away anytime soon, right? They're not from your community, but they're visiting you and they're going to be there for months. So that's what I mean by visitors. So in this example, this person answered 5. Okay. Now you're getting the household breakdown. Who are those 5 people? So the first question you're going to ask is, how many of the people who live here are adults, 25 years or older? Okay. And in this instance, they answered 2. So that means there's 3 people left. So the next question is, how many boys or young men 0 to 24 live here? So again, you've put down 2 fingers, and now they've told you 2 boys or young men 0 to 24 live here. I'm sorry, guys, for the noise. I hope it's not too bad. So 2. So put down 2 more fingers. So can someone tell me how many people there should be left in the house?
1.
1, exactly. Okay. All right. I know that sounds silly, but the problem is when you're doing this, sometimes people get it wrong. So in theory, there should be 1 person left, and because you've already done adults and you've done boys, the 1 person left should be a girl. So you ask, how many girls and young women 0 to 24 live here? Again, don't forget babies, relatives, household help, and visitors, and they tell you 1. Great. That means they told you 5 people lived here in total, and when they broke down who those 5 people were, it added up to 5. So that's fantastic. But what happens if they get it wrong? What happens if they tell you 6 people live here, but when they break it down, it's only 5 that they've counted? This is where you are going to have to ask them gently, Madam, I understand you just told me that there's 5 people who live here, but you originally said 6. Are you forgetting somebody? You have to gently probe them to tell you or clarify if they have forgotten somebody or miscounted. It's also possible that they say only 5, but actually when they add it all up, it's more than the original number they gave you. So either way, you need to clarify. And it's very, very important that you make sure that they are not forgetting to count themselves. They might be an adult, but they also might be one of these girls or young women. So if they're only 24 years old and they haven't counted themselves, then you're overlooking someone you want to ask more information about. So this is why it's important to get the breakdown as accurate as possible. Now I say that, but it doesn't mean you fight with them about it. If they don't want to, if they're insistent, no, it's only 5, it's only 5, it's only 5, then you can just go back and correct the answer. It's more important that this breakdown is correct. So if when it adds up to less or more than the original number, just go back and fix this answer here. But don't fight them too much on these breakdowns. And especially make sure that you have recorded how many girls or young women are there. This question at the end here is the most important, because no matter whichever number you enter is the number of times the next set of questions is going to come up. And you need to make sure you have captured as many of the girls as accurately as possible. Okay? Any questions about this before we move on?
Yeah,
Okay.
no question on my
Okay. No.
side.
Okay. All right. So this is where you get to the information about the girls. So we know we had 1 girl, which means that we're going to only get the set of questions about the girls 1 time. Okay. If it was 2, you get it 2 times. If it's 3, you get it 3 times, and so on. Okay. Obviously, the more girls live in that home, the longer you're going to be at that home asking these questions. Okay. So first, you're going to say, so now I'm going to ask you a few questions about the girls in the house, starting with the oldest. Obviously, if it's only 1 girl, you don't have to say starting with the oldest, but that is what you're intending to do. And the reason that we say that is just so that the person who's responding to you can keep organized in their mind who they're talking about each round. So first you ask, how old is she? In this case, she's 15. Okay. Here's something important. If she's under 1 years old, so she is 6 months, 5 months, whatever, you enter the number 0. This question of how old is she will only take a whole digit. It won't allow you to type in 6 months, 3 months, whatever. So if she is under 1 years old, you enter 0. If she is under 6 years old, you will get no more questions. We are only concerned in the girl roster questionnaire about girls 6 to 24. So if she's under 6, it will skip ahead. It will not ask you to do any more questions about the girls or about this girl. Okay, is that clear? Okay. Then, so this girl was 15. So the next question is, has she ever gone to school? Yes. Is she currently attending school? No. So what is the highest level she completed? If she is no longer in school, that means she dropped out at some point. And when did she drop out? At what level of school did she finish and end her schooling? So it will say what is the highest level she completed, and these answer choices are customized to your context. So we have to include any schooling level from ages 6 to 24, and that includes including university, college, vocational school, any other kinds of schools that might exist. So I have implemented the girl roster in Tanzania before, so I have these answer choices already. But I just wanted you to understand that this is one of the questions where the choices get customized for you. Let's consider her schooling for a moment. If she has never gone to school, never, ever, ever went to school, you will not get any more questions about schooling. If she currently attends, you will get the other questions about schooling. If she is gone. If she attended but no longer attends school, you will get the other questions about school. So the point being that if she's never gone to school, there will be no more questions. If she did go to school at some point or is currently in school, you will. So what last level of schooling completed means is that if she is currently in school, it's the level before the one she is currently in. So if she is in standard 4, then the last level she completed was standard 3, right? If she is no longer in school, it's the last level she completed before she dropped out. So maybe she dropped out when she was supposed to go into standard 4, but that means the last level she completed was standard 3. Is that clear? I'm going to pause here and make sure there's no question.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right. So does she have any children? Yes or no? How many children does she have? In this case, it was 1. And let's consider childbearing for a moment. This is important as well. These questions are asked before questions about marriage, as you noticed. We went from schooling to childbearing. Does anyone want to venture a guess as to why we ask about kids before we ask about marriage? So why do you think we ask about whether she has children before we ask about whether she is married?
Well, I think in a usual setting, one would think you expect them to have kids when they are married. So if you start with asking whether she is married and later come to ask if she has kids, the first question might feel kind of prejudiced. So one might hold the information of having kids since she has already responded on not having been married. That's what I would think.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly right. If you
yeah,
ask her
essentially,
about children before you ask about whether she's married, you'll get hopefully a more truthful answer, right? Whereas if she answers, I'm not, if she tells you that that girl is not married, and then you ask, oh, but does she have children? She's not going to want to tell you, oh, but she has children, right? Because she just told you she's not married. So 100%, that's absolutely right. Thank you so much for that answer. The other reason we do it is it's the order of vulnerability. Obviously, having children is actually a greater risk factor depending on her age than being married is. Now, being both is also very risky depending on her age, but having children increases her vulnerability um, more than being married does. So that's also a bit of an order of risk. Now, that said, in certain contexts, and I haven't faced this issue in Tanzania, but in certain contexts, we will reorder it, especially if there's like a stigma of suggesting that she has children and she's not married. But we haven't had that issue so far in Tanzania. So I will likely, in discussion with you, keep it this order the way it is. So if she is 12 years or younger, second bullet here, these questions are not going to be asked. So that's really important. We will not ask about marriage or childbearing if when you entered her age, it came out to 12 or younger. Okay. And that's because we start veering into kind of sensitive territory when she is that young and it's possible that she's married or already has children of her own. Again, in certain contexts, we have adjusted. And we have especially adjusted in contexts where you're going to miss a lot of girls who have children or a lot of girls who are married if you don't ask that question to girls 12 years or younger.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
we've worked in places. Yeah, go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Actually, the question was, what if we think of adding a question of if that girl is cohabiting, maybe she's not married but living with a man.
We are about to come to that, but that's a very good question. Yeah, we're about to get there. Thank you for that. So again, in certain contexts, we have changed the question, the age skip rule. And that has been in cases where there are so many girls married and having children that young that you're going to miss some really important information. Again, in Tanzania, I haven't seen that much, so we normally leave this alone. And again, when answering how many children she has, you have to enter a whole number. So if she said yes, she has children, then when you enter how many children, you're answering about children that already are existing. So not any pregnancies, just children who exist in the world. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You enter a whole number. So to your question that you just brought up, what is her marital status? So we do ask about cohabitating, and these answer choices can be customized if you want. But our standard questionnaire says, what is her marital status? Single, never married, married or living with a partner, married but not living with that partner, declined or unable to answer, and normally other, but we can include divorced, for example, as a choice. So this is custom. This is the standard answer choices, but again, it can be customized. And to your point, whoever just spoke, you can see right here, the married or living with partner captures what you're talking about. So they are cohabitating, but they're not technically married. Now, again, you brought that up in regards right after I mentioned this thing about 12 or younger. This question is not going to come up if she is 12 or younger. Again, if you guys you think you're going to miss a lot of girls or a lot of vulnerabilities by doing that, we can talk about changing that skip rule if necessary. Any questions before I go on? Okay, so then the last question is, does her mother or father live here? So neither parent lives here, her mother lives here, her father lives here, both parents live here, or declined or unable to answer. In certain settings where it's very common parents are not in the home, but you just want to know whether she has any kind of guardian there at all, we can add the answer choice, guardian lives here. That's again only in places where, for example, we did this girl roster in Haiti after the earthquake. A lot of parents had unfortunately died. And so it was very common that these kids were living without their parents. And so instead we added the choice of, does a guardian live here? Because if she had no kind of protection at all from an adult, then that was a bigger problem. Finding out whether her parents lived there or not was not unheard of. Okay. And that's it. You go to the last section, which is GPS and other observations. So as you're doing this part, you start to say your goodbyes, you thank them for their time. If you're not already outside, you make sure that you're outside of their house so that your phone can see the sky in essence, and you hit record location. It starts to load. It might take a few minutes, but as soon as you see on this window loading location numbers appear, you give it a little bit longer and then you hit record location. You can really do it at any point. It's not going to be 100% accurate. It's giving you kind of a general GPS. And we don't want it to be 100% accurate because it's a security concern. We don't want it to be exactly on the house. We just want it to be in the vicinity. So you hit record location again, and this comes up as your location, the latitude, longitude, altitude, and accuracy. As you can see, it's 39.12 meters. and you keep going. If GPS doesn't work, if you're standing there and it's saying it's just circling and loading and loading and loading and it looks like nothing's going to happen, you can just hit cancel and swipe and move on. Do not spend more than just like 2 to 3 minutes waiting on this. And I say that because GPS just sometimes does not work, and it's unfortunate. We work in communities that are isolated, that are far from the electrical grid, that maybe are by huge bodies of water, which automatically means GPS is going to have a hard time finding you. Whatever the reason, it might not work, and that's okay. We don't want you to waste time sitting on it, and waiting. Hopefully for you guys it will. I'm gonna give you guidance on how to set up the phones to improve the possibility of it working, but it just sometimes doesn't. And again, that's okay if it doesn't. So let's consider GPS for a moment, and these are some of the tips I was referring to. First, a SIM card can really help GPS work. Again, that doesn't matter if you're off the electrical grid because you're not going to get 3G anyway or any kind of connection. But in general, a SIM card can help. Setting up location services on your phone or tablet can really improve a GPS. And I will give you guys, if you do decide to use phones or tablets, I will give you directions on how to set up the phones. It can also improve the efficacy of location services by dropping a pin. So when you are in Wi-Fi, just opening Google Maps, dropping a pin so that the phone knows where it is, verify that when you drop that pin that you pinpoint like, oh, where am I? That the phone gets it right. Oh, I'm at my office. Good. The phone knows that I'm at the office. And then once you're out of Wi-Fi, hopefully the phone has realized where you're going because you've left and can track it. And again, sometimes the GPS still doesn't work. If you want a few minutes and take a few minutes and still not work it, you simply swipe left and go to the final section of the questionnaire. And this is your opportunity to take down qualitative observations. And what I mean by that is you asked the head of the home about the girls who live there. You asked her very, very impersonal, non-sensitive questions. It does not mean, however, that you did not observe things that you want to make sure are recorded. So we give you some options here. We give you some to note the issues you observed, and we give you answer choices for things that we think are important. You might have seen an adolescent who's pregnant. You might have observed disability, illness. You might have noticed that this is a child headed home. You might have noticed household help that you don't think they were counting, or any other kind of observation. So that's the first thing. And these choices here can be customized again. So if for any reason you wanted to add anything, you could. For example, we've worked in communities where the type of roof, for example, that the house had really told you a lot about the economic level or the poverty level of that home. In the same community, you would see really nice roofs, and then you would see tin roofs. And this partner really wanted to know which houses had the tin roofs because they knew that those homes were very, 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 very poor. So you might add that, for example, in your choices here. That's just one example, but again, you might have other ideas. You might have noticed, for example, signs of abuse, and you want to make note of that, or signs of violence, and you want to make note of that. The nice thing about this is you're not asking anybody directly any sensitive questions. You are just using your own eyes and ears to note anything you observed. And again, there's one more opportunity to do that, and this is written. So are there any notes that you would like to make? And you can make any other notes you want here. For example, maybe the woman you were speaking to complained about how she's sick all the time. And even though you can't help her, you want to note that this is a household where there's a lot of sickness or illness going around. So whatever the other observations are, there's an opportunity to write as much as you like. Then you're going to swipe right. You're going to make sure the marked form is finalized is here, that the questionnaire is final. You're going to hit save form and exit. And it will bring you back to the main screen. And as you can see, once you've completed a form, next to send finalized form, there will be a number for one form completed. And as you continue to do more and more and more, this will continue to increase. And that's it. That is the entirety of the girl roster questionnaire. Okay. I'm going to pause here and double check that you don't have any other questions before we move on.
Tim, if you have any question.
Yeah, not on my side. I'm okay.
It's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, I hope this is,
Yeah.
I mean, I know you guys are very experienced researchers and data collectors, so I'm sure this is probably the most straightforward household survey you've seen. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to move on in that case because we might be able to end early today if we are we're doing pretty well on time. So I just want to talk about how you're going to practically implement the girl roster now that we've talked about that. So Deborah and others on the line, obviously there's a conversation you guys need to have amongst yourselves about whether you can do this by phone or tablet or not. And if that's not the case and you would need to do this by pen and paper, then that's a whole new element of how we get you prepared in that way to do it. But there are other things you need to consider in order to implement this tool. Your team, your community selection, your preparation to actually roster, and the resources you have to do it. So your team, or what we call the rosters, it sounds like you want them to be peer educators, but in general, it can be program staff, girl mentors, local volunteers. Some people have hired researchers or enumerators by like a company. The more rosters you have, so the more people you have to do this, the faster the process can be. And I will say the faster it is in general, the cheaper it is, especially if the people that are rostering are not expecting to be paid. Sorry, do you have a question? Can you all just make sure you're muted unless you have a question? Okay. So what I was saying was is that generally this is cheaper the faster it is, especially if the people you are having roster are not expecting payment or a stipend of some sort. But it is important to think about factors like how many phones and tablets you'll need, how you're going to pay for transportation, food, water, all of those things. So it's kind of a bit of a balancing act because obviously the more team that you have, the more of that stuff you need, but the faster it goes, so the less days you need those things. So that's what I mean about it being a bit of a balancing act. And I can never, as so many people ask me all the time, how much will this cost? And I unfortunately, it's very hard for me to estimate without knowing how many people you have doing it. We highly recommend, like I said, that the team goes out in pairs. And this is really important. There should be at least one female in each pair. This is not only for safety and efficiency, but it's for the comfort level of the respondent. So whoever you are speaking to is ideally going to be female. And they are probably only going to feel comfortable talking to another woman. So at least one person in the pair, the teams you send out, should be a woman. She can be the one who asks the questions. And if her teammate is a man, he can be the one who enters the answers on the phone. Okay. Now, if for any reason you get to a household and the person who wants to respond is a man, then you could switch if you'd like. Okay. The rosters, your team who goes and uses this are preferably over 18 years of age, are comfortable using smartphones or tablets, or at least doing household surveys, can write and read. Again, can speak, read, and write in the language of the form, which in your case will obviously be in Swahili, I believe, unless there's another language you wish to use, and are familiar with the communities being rostered. And that doesn't mean they have to be from the communities, although if they are from the communities, all the better, but they should be familiar with the communities. And all I mean by that is know how to act, know how to greet, know how to behave, know how to speak. Any questions about this? So let me ask you, Deborah, you mentioned that you guys want the peer educators to do this. How many peer educators are there?
Overall, we have more than 400 peer educators.
Wow. Okay. So you
Yeah.
might not need all of them because 400 means 200 phones or whatever if you're going to use phones. I doubt you're going to need all 400. So you should start thinking about who of those 400 would be good using these kinds of qualifications. They need to, again, be able to speak, read, write in a language. Since you're going to use peer educators, I would recommend they do be on the older side. And more importantly, they need to, because they're still young themselves, they have to be confident. They have to feel comfortable going to a house, asking questions, doing all of those things. So think about, you might start a recruitment, and we've worked with partners, in fact, Dreams partners who've done this before, who have taken the 400 peer educators they have and have recruited specifically for this exercise. So you might want to think about how you will judge the qualifications of a good peer educator to do something like this. So the next thing is your community selection. So consider the level at which you are going to roster. And I remember we talked yesterday about administrative levels. You said that the finest, most discrete administrative level in your country is the hamlet. And a hamlet is normally in the hundreds of households. You might decide is the perfect level at which to roster. You want to know, you want to see your information at the hamlet level, and you also want to be able to aggregate up to the ward level. But that's something you guys need to discuss. And then once you figure that out, which hamlets or which wards are you rostering in? And the way to consider this is, as I mentioned before, is what does the average girl consider walkable, both physically and socially? Is she looking at the entire ward as her community, as the entire village as her community, or is the entire hamlet her community? Again, you have to think about how many communities you'll select and why. So that really depends on the scope and the breadth of your project. And you have to think about communities that are both representative of your program area as well as outliers or atypical communities. So that's why I say you don't have to roster everywhere, but you do need to get a good sample of places. So I recommend you really look, if you're, let's say, working in, how many, a ward would be made up of what, like 20 hamlets, is that right? An average ward?
There isn't actually an absolute number to that question, but
To that question, okay.
yeah, we can't get it right now.
Because some wards are very big, I know, and some are very small.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's say so let's just assume for the moment, for now, that the ward is made up of, let's say, 20 hamlets. You don't have to go to every hamlet. You just need to go to the one, a sample of the ones that you're planning to program in, or that are similar to the rest of the communities you're planning to program in. So that's what I mean about choosing places that are representative. But I also strongly recommend you choose the ones that are atypical and you make sure you roster them. An atypical community can be atypical for all sorts of reasons. It could be because it's the furthest away from the school, or it could be because it's more isolated than the other communities. It could be that because it's got a different industry. It's the one community that's a fishing village, whereas the others are not. Or maybe it's a red light district. There's a lot of trafficking or sex work happening in that community. Or it's on the border, so there's a lot of migration or violence, or whatever the reason. You need to make sure you're including those if you plan to even work in them, because imagine if you think about all those different factors, girls' lives in that community is going to be completely different than the girls' lives in a more typical community. So that's something to think about when you're thinking about the communities you select to roster. Any questions about that?
Yes, Sophie, I have a question. For
Sure.
instance, we select one hamlet to do the roster. Should we do the roster in all household at that hamlet, or we can select a few household?
No, you have to do all households in that hamlet. That's how the
Okay.
girl roster works. So the sampling is at the community level, at the which communities you choose. But once you choose those communities, you go to every household in them. And I will tell you, it might seem extreme, it might seem like a lot, but actually to do, like, let's say a hamlet is 200 households, you can actually do that in like with the number of teams you have available to you, you could actually probably do that in 3 to 4 hours. It won't actually take you that long because every home is not going to take you more than 10 minutes. And you're going to have many teams based on how many, you have a lot of peer educators to choose from. So I think you've got enough manpower, human resources, to do this quite efficiently. But I do not recommend, based on everything you've told me, that you only do this in one hamlet. I don't think one hamlet is going to give you enough information. I think you're going to have to choose more than that. And that's the level at which you're sampling. Is that clear?
Yes, Sophie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Do you have any other questions, team? Okay. Your preparation to roster, getting the community ready. And I think you guys know this already, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But obviously, wherever you're planning to do this, they must be prepared for your arrival and basically aware of what your intention is. You must be prepared for the community and their needs. So that goes back to my point about how they might ask you other questions or express other concerns. And you have to work with the community members and leaders. So I believe, if I remember correctly, in your communities there's requirements. You have to go through ministries and like local government in order to get permission to use a tool like this. So to do this kind of exercise. So obviously once you've figured out where you're going, I leave it to you to do to make those measures, take those steps. I will also say it is completely within your power and your decision making on how to do this safely amongst COVID. So I think this is still a very doable tool. You can sit outside, you can sit 6 feet apart, you can ask the questions. I don't know what the current policy and protocol is in Tanzania, but I just ask that you guys obviously follow whatever rules you are choosing to as an organization. Don't certainly I have no interest in seeing you guys put yourself at risk just for the sake of using the girl roster. We have had partners who are ready and revving to go, but there's protocols in place that make it impossible. And I've always said to them, obviously, then don't do it, right? There's no need to put yourselves at risk just for the sake of using this tool. And I would also encourage that you work with community leaders or members to get at least a crude map of the communities. Having a map, even just something hand drawn of like where the houses are, where the pathways are, can really help you in figuring out how to send your team out to cover all the houses without repeating. So let's say you have 20 teams of 2 people, right? So that's 40 people in total, 20 teams, and they're ready to go. You don't want them to go to all the same houses because that's a waste of resources. So you need to figure out, how am I going to send these 20 teams out in different directions so that they cover all the houses, but they don't go to the same ones as each other. So having a map to understand where the houses are and understanding the walking path to the houses can really help. Another thing that can really help, and this has happened before, is sometimes the organization recruits community members to go with the teams so that they can help them guide them to the houses and make sure that they don't repeat going. The members don't have to do introductions or anything like that. They're just kind of there as an extra set of hands. Okay, any questions? Okay. So the last thing I will talk about is testing and implementing, and this again will not necessarily apply if you guys are going to use this paper and pen, but I strongly recommend you practice using the goal roster among the team, especially if you're using the phones. It helps you test for any technical issues. So practice with each other as if one person is a community member answering questions and one person's implementing the tool. I recommend you start with one community and you allow yourself 3 to 5 hours to roster and see how much of the community you cover with the team you have. On the days you're rostering, again, just be mindful of transportation, food, water, how you're dressed. Dress comfortably. Don't dress in anything flashy. This is especially true for women. be prepared to walk a lot. So it's really important you're dressed comfortably and you're in comfortable shoes. We've done this tool before, and in fact in Tanzania with colleagues who wore heels because they're used to wearing heels, especially for big workshops and meetings, and they were very, very uncomfortable by the end of the day. So start with one community, go out, and after that first day, come back together, or if your peer educators are doing the tool, ask them to come back together and report to you. Was there any confusion? Were there any technical problems? Any challenges you faced? And make sure they take the time to upload the completed forms. And since it's peer educators that are going to be doing this, make sure if they're going to use the girl roster on the phone, make sure you collect the phones or tablets back from them before they leave for the day. If there are technical issues, I'm available to consult before you go out and roster again. And it's really important we address any of those issues before you go back out again. Any questions on this? Is someone trying to ask a question, or they're just unmuted?
Bonnie, do you want to ask a question? Oh. Sophia, I was just wondering, is it possible to download the report after the peer educator done with filling in the form?
Yeah, so the way that so this is the thing, Deborah. You mean the results? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah. So if they're doing this by phone or tablet, it's automatic. So they will upload, and I will have given you access to the output tables, which I'll show you in a minute what those look like, that give you your results. And they will continue to update as they upload more and more and more completed forms. So yes, it's possible to see the results right away as they're coming in and as the upload is happening. But again, that's only if you're doing this by phone or tablet. If it's by paper, obviously, you know that that's not possible.
So as they are uploading their data, you get the information of this data that they are uploading, they're entering
Yeah,
in
exactly.
real time. In real
Yeah,
time.
in relatively real time. So how many are all of you familiar? Is anyone on the phone not familiar with Google Sheets?
Oh, I'm familiar with Google Sheets.
Okay. So Google Sheets, as you guys know, is basically Excel, but on Google online.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I will do is I generate the girl roster output template. So this is where all your tables exist. And I tend to do that either in advance or like the first day you guys go out to roster. So I will generate it. I will give you access to it through the Gmail account I am asking you to create as a team for this exercise, the one Gmail account. And what will happen is as they're uploading it, if you refresh that page, those outputs, the numbers should start to update themselves because the numbers are coming in for each of the different pieces of the output. So let me show you quickly what an output table looks like. And I think what I'll do is I'll show you some of this, but I want you to know that we can go through the analysis bit a little bit more, certainly later on after you guys have started to roster. But this is what you'll see online, is a table that looks a little bit like this. Pretty much the same table. The only difference here is I've got a description that obviously would not exist because that's for this particular example. But everything else would be the same. It would say girl roster overview output table. It would say your organization's name and location, and I believe the date. And all of that is automated. And then everything else will start to come through. All these numbers will be inputted that are in these cells here. This remains the same, the age group, the unmarried, married, and so on. So I'll read this table to you so you guys understand. But this is the overview table. There's other examples of tables that we have, but your first tab will be the overview. It will say unmarried and married at the top. And then for the unmarried girls, it will show you girls in school and out of school. Under in school and out of school, it will tell you whether they're living with both parents, with one parent, or neither parent. If they are unmarried and they have a child, then they will fall under here. It doesn't matter whether they're in school, out of school, living with parents or not. If they have a child and they're unmarried, they'll come under here. And that is because at that point, their vulnerability has been defined by the fact that they are unmarried and they have children. It doesn't really matter whether they're in school or out of school or living with parents at that point. They have a child and they are unmarried. That can be a problem depending on the girl, and especially depending on her age. If you wanted to know, and we can talk about this in a minute, you can see the girls who have children and other details about them. But I think we know from experience that most girls who have children, and especially if they're unmarried, are not in school, and they're likely not with parents. So that's why it's sectioned off this way. Now, if they're married, it will tell you if she has a child or doesn't have a child as well. Okay. And there's a grade bar here to keep the 6 to 17-year-olds apart from the 18 to 24-year-olds. And that's because in our work, we are primarily concerned about very young adolescents, especially that 10 to 14-year-old cohort. The 18 to 24-year-olds, most of the programs we work with are not programming for that age group. And if they are, it's very different, the kind of things the age group needs. But the other reason they're held apart is because the 18 to 24-year-olds could potentially be mentors, depending on whether they're doing well. So that's what this tells you. And as you can see, it also tells you the totals. So for each age cohort, it tells you how many are in each of those cohorts and the total overall for the community you're in. So in this community, it was 1,846 girls in total that existed here. Okay. Is this table clear? Does anyone have questions about this table?
No.
Okay. Now, some of you might have noticed that the age cohorts are different. 6 to 9 is 4 different ages, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 10 to 12 is 3, 10, 11, 12. 13 to 14 is only 2, and 15 to 17 is 3 again. And you might wonder, well, why that shift? Why those differences? And the reason is because 6 to 9-year-olds tend to have very different kinds of programming needed, and they're prepubescent, right? They're pre-puberty. 10 to 12-year-olds are probably in the crux of a big shift. They are in puberty or about to be in puberty. And the reason we separate 10 to 12 and 13 to 14 is because in most schooling systems, you are on a 6 or 7-year schooling system, which means that the transition from primary school to secondary school happens between 12 and 13. And the reason that's important is because the shift from primary to secondary school is often where there's a lot of dropout, there's a lot of more exposure to different risk factors, and so on. And so we want to keep the 10 to 12-year-old information separate from 13 to 14 information so we can see, is that kind of shift happening? Okay? So that's what this table tells you. Now, how can the results shape your program decisions? I'm just going to show you some of the observations we made when we did this in an HIV-affected community in Haiti. First, we noticed that there's a high number of girls married and with children in this program site. So, especially because this organization was interested in HIV, girls and young women who are at risk at HIV, they were very keenly interested in this population, girls married and with children, because the risk for HIV increases with both of those things. We also noticed that there was a large number of girls under the age of 13 who were living with neither parent. So we were interested in why and how to reach them, because if they're living with neither parent, then they're probably not being well looked after. We also noticed that there was an interesting drop off from ages 10 to 12 to 13 to 14 in schools in living with both parents, 206 to 80, and being in school. So where did
Hello, Sophie. Sophie, you are muted. No, you're muted up. Hi, Sophie.
Hi. Please make sure you don't mute me. I didn't mute myself. So I'm not sure what happened, but please make sure you don't mute me. Otherwise, you're gonna miss what I'm saying. Okay. All right. I don't know where I left off. Can someone tell me what you missed? Deborah, can you tell me where I got muted?
Yeah, you were discussing on the age of 20 to 12, 13 to 14, who are living with both parents and they are in school.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we noticed there's 206 girls 10 to 12 living with both parents and in school, and suddenly that drops to 80, which means that they're no longer, it's possible this drop off is because there's a change in schooling status. So that's worth interrogating and worth finding out more about. Okay. And then lastly, further investigation into these girls. We have 15 to 17-year-olds, 107 of them who are living with both parents, they're in school, they're unmarried. If they're not behind in school, so they're in school and they're also not behind, that can tell you that there's maybe a really good pool of potential mentors or peer educators in this group here. Okay. So that's one thing that the overview output table can tell you. The other thing it can tell you, and this is really particularly useful when talking to donors, is how many girls are on track or off track. Donors really, really love that term, and they love seeing that idea of off track or on track in percentages or fractions. So what we've done for you is we've calculated, we have tables called the off track, on track tables, and we've calculated those categories of off track by 3 different definitions. So as the number category goes up from 1 to 3, the definition expands. So how we define girls who are off track in category 1 is girls who are 6 to 17 who meet at least one of these conditions. They are either out of school or married or have a child or are living with neither parent. So the green, the pink, the yellow, and the purple capture all of those. And in that calculation, 22% of the girls who are 6 to 17 years old are off track by category 1. Now, as I mentioned, as you keep going up in category, the definition expands. So from definition, sorry, I forgot to, there's a typo here. This is category 2. We add living with just one parent. And now 45% of the girls 6 to 17 are off track by category 2. Okay. Then we add one more. This is category 3. Again, apologies, there's a typo. We add girls who are also behind grade for age. That's in the red. And this is a back-end calculation. You're not going to see this in the table, but you can find out how many girls are behind grade for age. And for each of these cohorts, it was 7, 10, 15, and 28 girls. So even though they're in school, they're behind. And so that's how you get to 75% of the girls 6 to 17 are off track by category 3. So just so you know, what are the output tables available for analyzing the roster information? We have the overview output table. That was the first one I went through. It displays girls 6 to 24 by their marital status, schooling, living arrangement, or without children. Then we have the off-track, on-track tables. They calculate the number and percentage of girls in each off-track category by those age cohorts. 6 to 9, 10 to 12, 13 to 14, 15 to 17, 18 to 19, 20 to 24. Actually, sorry, only 6 to 17. I apologize. And then the girls with children table shows you only girls with children by marital and schooling status. So if you just wanted to know about girls with children, then there's a table to allow you to do that. And lastly, I will say you can learn about your program's coverage. So one of the questions I did not show you that's possible to add into the girl roster form is asking does this girl participate in X program? So let's say you are going to a community in which you already offer programming and you want to know what your coverage is like. Let's say your program is called the Blue Note program. So you can ask the question, is this girl participating in the Blue Note program? Yes or no? And as a result, you can see how many girls you are reaching. So this is the same site as before, this example, this example from Haiti, where the organization was implementing a reproductive health and HIV program. And as you can see, the numbers have now changed to be fractions. So the top number shows you how many girls in that box are participating in the program. And so they knew that of the 1,846 girls living in this community, they were only reaching 191. Now that's already bad, right? Because that's not a huge number of girls. But the bigger problem is, or the bigger question is, are those 191 girls that they're reaching the girls who need their program the most? Let's go through that. 1,213 of the girls are 6 to 17 years old in this program. Of those girls, in this community, of those girls, 145 of them are participating in the program. So 145 of them are 6 to 17 out of the 191. Okay, so they're reaching a good age, but now how many of those girls really need it? Well, 116 of those 145 participants, or 80%, are actually relatively on track. They're in school. Yeah, some are not living with parents. Maybe they're living with only one or neither, but still they're doing pretty well. And that's 60% of the total participants. So 60% of their total participants are actually not the most in need. And meanwhile, the girls who married and or have children, both of whom are very much in need of reproductive health support and very much at risk for HIV, none of them are participating in this program. So when this organization did an assessment of their program participation, they realized they had a major issue in terms of skew. They were reaching girls who needed their program the least. Any questions about that?
Hello, Sophie. This is not a question. I think the last slide, or the question that should be added in a girl roster for us, I think this will be one of the questions. If a girl has been the beneficiary of the previous project or the project that we are currently implementing.
Yeah, we can absolutely add that in, and that will give you a really good idea of what your coverage was like when you went with your previous program. And we would do that at the end of the girl question. So after the question about is she living with parents, we can add a question that says, has this girl participated in, and you can name your program or name many programs, whatever it is that you want to include. Yeah, and then we would create a table like this for you to show you what your coverage is like for each of the segments. And by the way, each of these boxes constitutes a segment, right? So a segment, remember, as I talked about last time, is a specific group of girls who are grouped together because they share characteristics. So any one of these boxes could be considered a segment, as well as any gathering of boxes. So this one here, right, for example, the 19 girls who are 6 to 9, living with one parent, out of school, unmarried, that's a segment because that's all the descriptors for them. Are clear. So what does the GPS coordinates tell you? I'm going to go back to this visual we had yesterday. GPS coordinates, if they work, can tell you where the girls are that you want to reach. So as well as their potential mentors. So going back to this example, this hypothetical where the orange girls are girls 10 to 14 years old, out of school and or behind in school by 2 years. Let's say those are the kinds of girls you want to reach, but you just don't know where they are. Well, a GPS coordinate, when you upload that information into Google Maps, allows you to generate maps, and you can see different kinds of segments that you would like to see and see where they are. So in this example, we see that all the girls in this community are on the other side of the river. Well, then no wonder that they're not going to school or that they're behind because school is so far away from them. You can also see potential mentors. So in the green, like, you might start to understand, well, in each of these communities, how many girls might we be able to recruit to support and mentor the younger girls? And again, I just want to remind you that the girl roster is only one part of this entire learning journey. So I say this especially to Dreams partners, and really to any partner who's been prescribed or recommended to do the girl roster by a donor. I really caution that just because a donor tells you to do this does not mean it is a box to check. I don't want you to waste resources or time just because a donor is telling you to do something. I want you to make sure you are using the girl roster and its information to its full possibility. And so I'm here to support in that. I'm here to provide follow-up trainings, to introduce you to other tools, other resources that are part of this learning journey, but it is by no means just a box check. I don't want you guys to feel stuck like this is what we have to do and then that's it. There is a lot that potential of the information and how it can be used. Wrap up there. And we're just coming up on 10 o'clock, which is perfect. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just ask if you have any remaining questions and comments, concerns. And then what I recommend we do is a couple of things. One is you guys, I think, need to decide if this is better done by pen or paper or by phone. I think you need to discuss as a team where you want to roster and come back to me with the thought process behind that selection so I can just confirm with you it makes sense to me. And then we have to proceed in getting you all set up. And I will, in the meanwhile, share with you these recordings and share with you the slides so you have them for your consideration.